Before we get started, this podcast contains graphic language and descriptions of violence. Keep that in mind in choosing when and where to listen. In the hours before Harriet Thompson was murdered in her apartment in Salem, Oregon, she called several people. We found a list of those numbers she dialed in the police file, called all of them. Of course, none were good anymore. This all happened 25 years ago. Ryan and I scoured phone books and city directories at the local library, but our search went nowhere. From reading the police files, we know that one person Thompson called was her drug dealer, a young guy named D-Loke. He went to her apartment several times that night to give her drugs, and he told the police he was taken to the house by a man named Fred Gustafson. These were some of the last people who saw her alive, so I tracked Gustafson down.
Hello.
Hi, is this Fred?
It is?
Gustafson still lives in Salem. That first call, I told him I was looking into what happened to Harriet Thompson back in 1998, and he knew exactly what I was talking about.
And that's how my name got into it, because I'd taken someone up there where she was murdered.
I told Gustafson that Jesse Johnson, the man who'd been convicted of killing Thompson and sentenced to death, was about to get a new trial when he was suddenly let out of jail.
And I'm just kind of calling people to see if I can arrange interviews to try and just kind of understand that situation, but also the culture in Salem at that time.
I'll be open to it. I don't know how good I'll be at it. It's a long time ago, and my memory's not all that great anymore. But you're free to talk to me about it. I remember when she was murdered.
When we started researching all those numbers Thompson called the night she died, we were looking for anyone who might say something new about this case. Witness or a piece of evidence that might have been overlooked. But this case is so old. People who know something about it are either dead, in poor health, or very hard to find. Gustafson was a kind of breakthrough, though. He told me what happened back then still bothers him. And he wasn't the only person we'd soon find who had a lot more to say about Thompson's murder. From Oregon Public Broadcasting, this is Hush. I'm Leah Satilli. This is episode 6, Two Strangers. We showed up at the Salem retirement home where Fred Gustafson lives on a day when cream of chicken soup was on the menu. It's a plain facility on a busy road between a used car lot and a furniture warehouse. A lady at the front desk pointed us toward his room. We knocked, and Gustafson called us to come in. His room was dark. He keeps the blinds closed on sunny days. Gustafson has a long white beard and a full head of hair, wore a necklace of crystals. He was friendly enough, but when we asked him what he remembered about Harriet Thompson, his mood shifted.
I knew her. She lived right up near me. I was involved in that, transporting people up to her place that day, that she was murdered. And it's just a whole horrible memories of my life. Yeah. That I really don't like going back on anymore. It's not me anymore. And
What was going on in your life at that time that made it so different than
drugs.
Gustafson told us that at the worst of his addiction to crack cocaine, he was holding down a government job for the Oregon Department of Transportation. In his job, he saw a lot of horrible car accidents, and that took a toll.
And it just messed my life up to where I couldn't deal with things anymore. And I turned to drugs because, God, best I felt in a long time when some friend of my wife's gave me something to try, and I didn't even know what it was. But God, it made me feel so good. I hadn't felt so good in years.
We were there to try to get a sense of the last hours of Thompson's life. And as we talked, Gustafson kept pointing to a mess of papers. They were scattered on the carpet. It looked like he'd flung them onto the floor in anger.
Sure.
Did you get that stuff out because I called you about it, or?
I don't know why I had it. Someone sent it to me. But it was all my testimonies back then about the whole incident.
Gustafson said that he'd brought D-Loke over to Thompson's house a few times the night she was killed. We asked him what he remembered.
I'm not going to go back and look through and tell you anything.
Yeah.
I read into that crap last night, and I didn't want to put it. I couldn't stand to read on. It was bringing back too many horrible memories. My life was one screwed up life. I was messed up bad.
Even though he'd told us to come talk to him, he didn't really seem to want to rehash it now that we were there. He said that back in 1998, he'd drive drug dealers and sex workers around, and they'd pay him in crack.
Do you remember how you met D-Loke? Was he just around? Was he...
I could have told you it's all in there in that paperwork I
would
read.
love, if you're tired of this paperwork, we would love to take it off your hands and read it.
Gustafson said fine. We could take the papers and give him a read, but we had to bring them back. During our conversation, he kept telling us over and over that was a bad time in his life, and he didn't want to remember it.
That's okay. Did you ever, would you...
No, I never killed anybody.
No.
No, I never did anybody harm. I always took people for rides and, to deliver stuff, and I'd get a kickback from it, That's how my addiction worked.
We picked up the pile of papers off the floor and told Gustafson we'd be back in a week. Ryan and I scrambled to a nearby Starbucks and started passing pages back and forth. And let me just say, what Gustafson let us borrow was shocking. It was a transcript of a deposition he gave in 2013. That was when Johnson got a new set of attorneys and investigators looking into his case. They found Patricia Hubbard, and they also tracked down Gustafson. What he told them opened another window into this world of drugs in Salem in 1998. Later, we tracked down the audio of this deposition, and you hear a much younger Gustafson. He was being interviewed by an attorney.
Did you know her name was Harriet Thompson, or did you find out later?
No, that came later, yeah.
Okay.
Gustafson said he knew Thompson for about a year when she was killed. They weren't friends, just acquaintances. He told the attorneys about seeing Thompson the day before she died. Sometime that afternoon, he was driving D-Loke to meet another drug dealer named Pooh Bear. Pooh Bear is an important person in all this. Remember back in the first episode, we talked about the time Harriet Thompson jumped out the window of a drug dealer's apartment? Well, that was Pooh Bear's place. And D-Loke, who Gustafson calls D-Lo, was connected to him too.
D-Lo asked me to give him a ride, and when we hit the top of Hillendale, the street I lived on, and stopped at 12th Street, there was Sunny.
And that's Miss Thompson.
Yeah, Miss Thompson, and that was the first time I'd seen her since, it would have been quite a while, a year maybe, something to that effect. And I just remember it shocked the heck out of me. She looked so clean-cut and better than I'd ever seen her in my life, I've seen her.
Like she had not been using?
No, not at all. She looked sharp. She looked great.
Okay.
Gustafson said Thompson hopped in the car, and they all went over to Pooh Bear's. Afterward, he drove her and D-Loke back to her apartment. At Thompson's place, Gustafson recalled meeting a guy who he believed was her new roommate. He was fuzzy on the details even in 2013.
And could you describe this new roommate?
Black.
Male, female?
Male.
This person was Jesse Johnson. This is the meeting that D-Loke would later detail to police before he looked at all those mugshots of black men in Salem. Gustafson said they were only at Thompson's place for a few minutes, just enough time for D-Loke to give her drugs.
Did you ever go back to Miss Thompson's apartment that day?
2 more times, I believe. I took D-Lo up and dropped him off.
It wasn't the last time Gustafson took D-Loke by Thompson's place that day, but it was the last time he went inside. The other times, he waited in the car.
So you took him, did you wait for him the second time? Or what, the third time?
I don't think I did.
Okay.
Because that's what concerned me about that I may have taken the individual that murdered her.
Gustafson said he remembered driving by Thompson's place the next day, and it was surrounded by red crime scene tape and police cars. The news was saying she'd been found dead in her apartment. He got nervous. He'd been there the day before. So he called his brother, asked him what he should do.
Said that he knew of someone on the inside that he trusted, that he felt wouldn't put me hung out to dry.
Okay. Now, you say your brother knew someone on the inside. Was that a police officer?
Yeah, it was Quackenbush.
Catch that? Gustafson said his brother knew a guy he could trust at Salem PD, Detective Mike Quackenbush. It's Quackenbush, by the way. I asked him.
Did you tell him about about D'Lo and taking
Yes,
him?
I did.
Did you give any description, do you recall, of the roommate?
Just said he was black, and
Okay.
I couldn't describe him other than wearing a cap or something. I thought he had a baseball cap on.
Gustafson said he met with Quackenbush and his partner several times. He couldn't remember the other detective's name, just described him as, quote, shorter, heavyset, glasses, balding. They sat down shortly after Thompson's murder, and Gustafson told them about taking D'Lo to her house. The detectives asked Gustafson to take a look at a photo throwdown, basically a lineup of mugshots. They asked,
Do you recognize the individual that was sitting on the couch when I was over there the night Sonny was murdered?
it was pretty clear to him that they'd spoken to D'Lo and that he'd told Quackenbush about the guy they'd met that day at Thompson's apartment, this supposed roommate. In the upper left corner was a photo of Jesse Johnson.
I said, I can't identify him. I don't see him.
Okay. And what was their response?
Well, are you sure? And then that was pretty much it.
Gustafson didn't really recognize anyone, and he thought that was it. But he said not long after, the detectives wanted to meet a second time and show him the photos again. Were any of these people Thompson's supposed roommate?
The second time I saw him, I just told him, no, I can't ID him.
Of the photos shown, Gustafson wasn't sure any of them were the person he'd seen. Again, he thought that was it. But then the detectives came back a third time. They showed him the same photos.
Okay, tell me what happened the third time.
The third time, both detectives were there. And they were saying that, well, D'Lo's identified one of these as the one that was there. I said, well, I can't do what I can't do, and I can't say something if I don't, And the, not Quackenbush, but the other detective said, well, D'Lo's already identified the individual as this guy.
Okay, did he point at a particular
He pointed
photo?
at the corner upper left person on the sheet. And he said, it would be financially advantageous to you if you would also identify him. And it blew me out of the water.
Gustafson said Quackenbush's partner pointed to a photo of a black man and told him it would be financially advantageous to pick that guy's photo. This was the guy D'Lo said he saw. Gustafson said it was pretty commonly known that Salem police had paid informants in the drug scene. Some were making $1,000 off good information they gave the police. It's not really news that Salem PD used paid informants. It's kind of standard, right? We've all seen The Wire. But there's a difference between what paid informants do and what Gustafson is describing. He's saying they were offering money for him to specifically pick out Johnson.
I was just totally flabbergasted by it. I couldn't believe he said it. And I told him, I said, no, I can't do that because I can't recognize him as the individual. I will not do that. And it just was against my morals and my ethics to do something like that. And to this day, and since then, I stand on what I did. It was the right moral thing to do.
What was their attitude towards you in terms of, did they seem upset with you? Or
I think the guy that wanted me to do it was upset with me, yes. And I told him I just can't go there. And, you know, he was upset with me, yeah.
Was there any...
Quackenbush wasn't so much, but this other joker was.
Did you ever have any conversations with either Quackenbush or his partner about what evidence they had against this person? Or?
Yeah, I did. They were telling me that he had this jewelry and he was trying to sell it and pawn it, you know, or trade it. But that doesn't mean anything in my world.
And why is that?
Because quite often jewelry was used as money for drugs if you didn't have money. Most often you never got your item back either. You know, because it was more valuable than what the dollar value was. So that's not uncommon that someone would have Sonny's jewelry. It just isn't.
Gustafson was not called as a witness at Johnson's trial, and he would later say that he would have told Johnson's original attorneys about his encounter with the detectives if they had asked him. When we came back to Fred Gustafson's place to give him back his papers, we found him on the back patio smoking cigarettes with some ladies.
They're helpful, yeah.
Remember how you said, I bet you're going to read these and have more questions. And we do. Do you have more questions? Yeah.
Yeah.
Such horrible time.
I can't say he was excited to see us, but he agreed to answer some more questions. So we followed him back to his room, and I asked him about his reaction to the detectives offering him money to pick the guy they pointed at in the photo throwdown.
Because you sounded pretty fired up about that in these, that you were like, that's not how I operate. So tell us a little bit. Could you tell us that story?
I wouldn't play along with what he offered me money for. No way. I wouldn't do it. That wasn't me. I wasn't that kind of person. I mean, I had my morals, even though I got messed up with a bunch of bad people. I still had my morals, and I would stick to them. So.
I mean, what did you think when he said that to you?
That blew me friggin' away. I was so upset, man. I could not believe that they did that, you know, to try to get me to point out someone that I didn't think was the end. No, I don't even know the guy.
You know, a lot of people like feel like a police officer is someone you can trust. You think that
they're going to be above that kind of shit.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to cuss, but
that's okay.
That was just so out of line with what I believed, you know, law enforcement should be doing. But they're trying to set it up to get someone nailed.
He didn't think D-Loke killed Thompson, said he didn't strike him as the killing type. He told the police he had no clue who killed her. D-Loke also didn't know. I reached D-Loke on the phone one day. He said he didn't want to sit down for an interview, said that when the police arrested him around the time of Thompson's murder and charged him for drug possession, it ruined his life. It took a long time for him to get things back on track, and he won't ever go back to Salem. Gustafson didn't understand what proof they had that the man they saw at her apartment was the killer. What Gustafson said amounts to us as another allegation of racism on the part of the Salem police. The first was from Patricia Hubbard, the neighbor who lived across the street. She said detectives waved away the information she had about a white man running away from the scene. She said someone with the department said, in no uncertain terms, a black person had been killed and a black person would go down for it. And here Gustafson was saying the police only had eyes for one person, Jesse Johnson, and they were willing to pay people to imply he was involved. Hubbard and Gustafson don't know each other, and neither had obvious beef with the local police. Johnson's attorneys knew they had found something meaningful when they located Gustafson. He's a former state employee whose life had gone off the rails because of his addiction, and yet he still said he wasn't willing to take what amounted to a bribe. Attorney Lynn Morgan wanted to put him in front of a jury if prosecutors took Johnson back to trial.
His whole story, I just thought, Fred was going to be such a great witness.
She said to her, it was clear evidence that Salem police led a biased murder investigation.
They really lean on him pretty hard. And ultimately, Fred says, and I don't have any reason to not believe him, considering everything in this case, that they tell him they could, it would be to his financial advantage if he picked Jesse.
The problem with Gustafson, though, is he just has a hard time remembering things now in his older age. We have his testimony, but when we talk to him, he would repeat how bad that time in his life was and how much he didn't want to remember it. But another person was eager to talk about that time. And in fact, no one had ever seriously interviewed her before I called.
So I was going through all the police files on it, and I noticed your name, or your what I imagine is your maiden name, and that you had called and said that you were a newspaper carrier at the time. Do you remember this?
Yes, I do remember that, because I was parked in a parking lot, and I saw somebody leave the area. I clearly remember that night.
When Ryan and I dug into the Salem Police's files, we scoured hundreds of pages. We checked every fact we could find against court records and interviews we'd already done. We noticed that in Detective Mike Quakenbush's early reports on the Thompson murder, he discussed the calls that came into the department, offering tips. He talked about the pilot, John Shaw, calling. Remember, John Shaw was the guy who said he'd seen a black man coming out of the bushes near the house on 12th and Shamrock around 6 a.m. that morning. After he called, Quakenbush drove to the murder scene again specifically to meet with Shaw. In his report, Quakenbush wrote, quote, "Mr. Shaw indicated he has excellent vision, as he is a pilot." As we told you, Shaw was treated like a star eyewitness. They made sure the jury knew he was a helicopter pilot with the Army National Guard, essentially someone who could be trusted. But here's the thing. In Quakenbush's own notes, he talks about another person who called in with a tip. A person who saw the same request for information about Thompson's murder. This person did not testify at the trial. In fact, this person's name has never been brought up by anyone. Not the prosecution, not the defense, not the police. Her name is Janelle Osborne. She was Janelle Thomason back in 1998. In Quakenbush's April 1998 report, he wrote that she, quote,
called the police department after seeing the article in the Statesman Journal newspaper regarding the death of Thompson.
This is OPB reporter Conrad Wilson reading the report for us.
Thomason told me she delivered newspapers and was out doing her deliveries in the vicinity of the victim's residence.
Janelle told the police that
between 3:30 and 4 a.m. on March 20th, 1998, she observed a white male adult walking north on 12th Street near the gravel parking area to Morningside School. Thomason described the individual as a white male adult, approximately 25 into their early 30s in age.
Janelle described the clothing the guy was wearing, and that he had long, scraggly hair and was unshaven. But there's nothing else about her in the police files. Which is weird, because she said she was outside the house right around when the murder happened. This parking lot she mentioned, we'd been there before, back when we were first reporting around 12th and Shamrock, looking like creeps.
So, we're in this parking lot that is at grade with the street. And it's like this 12th Street is kind of on a hill here, right? Like we're going uphill.
Which makes it even more interesting because I think Patricia Hubbard's view from the back of the house is actually the best view of Harriet's apartment. Unless somebody was sitting in this parking lot.
Turns out somebody was in this parking lot. Janelle. We didn't know that when we first started. Janelle doesn't live in Salem anymore. But after I called her, One day she offered to drive a couple of hours to meet us at the elementary school parking lot next to Thompson's house. Her husband and their grandson came along. They were wearing matching camouflage Cabela's gear. It was pretty cute.
We've been together for a little over 5 years, and she had never told me about this.
Oh, really?
And she gets this message from you, and she's like, oh my God, I had put that out of my head.
It was a chilly winter day. The wind was blowing as traffic whizzed past us. And Janelle said, being back here after all these years, it was a lot.
So I started to panic, like when I saw the street light up here right now. And so I was telling my husband, I was like, I'm a little bit like starting to get like a little bit of anxiety about this, and like I'm angry that like the police never contacted me after it. Nothing. I never heard anything from any judge, no lawyers, no anything.
We asked her to take us through what she remembered from that night back in March 1998. Back then, Janelle was 18. She was a young mother. Each morning, between 2 and 4 a.m., she went and picked up her papers at a nearby distribution center. And then she came here. This makes me feel like a dinosaur to say this, but I will anyway. For those of you born after the downfall of print media, let me just say here that the way it used to be was that daily newspapers were printed at night. That way newspaper carriers could pick them up and have them delivered by morning. Newspapers were like a slower Twitter. You just had to go outside to pick up your tweets.
And I would leave the distribution center and find a parking lot, and I would just usually roll. Well, this area here was my first route, and I always rolled my papers here, but sometimes I would be here at 2 o'clock in the morning. Other times I would be here at 4:30.
It was dark, and she was quietly rolling her papers. She wanted to finish up so she could get back home before her kids woke up.
Yeah.
So where were you? Show us
okay.
Where exactly.
So right now, this is totally different. It was not paved. This area was gravel. Okay.
She said the parking lot used to be up higher than it is now. So from Thompson's house, it would have been a pretty steep uphill slope. Now it's more gradual. As she sat there, a man came running from the direction of Thompson's house.
And then I was like, wait a second, that's really weird for somebody to be running at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. And the person ran this way. They ran right by me, but as he was coming up, he turned and he looked at me. And I made sure to keep eye contact with him because I was like, I'm a woman, I'm by myself, I have my own small children at home. I need to make sure I get home. And so I looked at him and I kept watching him until I couldn't turn my head anymore. And then when I couldn't turn my head anymore, I looked in my side view mirror to make sure he kept going. And I had locked my doors. I know he heard my doors lock, and he kept on going. And so I was like, that just felt really weird. He looked scared. He looked scared when he saw me. And he just kind of had like this deer in the headlight look.
If you had to physically describe him.
He was a white man. He was very rough, scruffy looking. To me, he had the look of maybe he had been either homeless or he had been on drugs.
Let me interrupt here with 2 points. The first is that this description of a scraggly-looking white man, it's pretty much exactly what Patricia Hubbard said she saw that night, sitting on her porch. A guy with long, unkempt hair running out of Thompson's house and up along 12th Street, straight past the elementary school parking lot. The other thing I think is worth noting is how different Janelle's description of this encounter is from what was in Quakenbush's report. His report says Janelle saw a man walking past her car, but both she and Hubbard said this guy was running.
On the news, they had said that there had been a person that was murdered, and I was like, oh my God, I was right there. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that over there anymore, you know. And I called my supervisor and I was like, hey, you need to get somebody else because I do not feel safe in that area anymore because the person who did this saw me. I'm not sure how good of a look he got at me, but I got a good look of him.
We showed Janelle a picture of Jesse Johnson and asked if there was any chance this was who she saw that night.
That is not the person.
Okay.
That is not.
Okay, that's the guy who went to prison for 25 years.
Yeah, no, that's not the guy.
Okay.
These were photos that we knew had been shown to Patricia Hubbard during her deposition. After we showed Janelle that picture of Johnson, we scrolled through pictures on my phone of white men who were questioned during this investigation.
Nope. No. That kind of looks like him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like he looks similar, or you feel?
No. The way it's his eyes. It's his eyes. Like that look right there is what I had looking at me.
Jeez.
Even though she said this guy wasn't an exact match for the man she saw, this person she picked out is the same person Patricia Hubbard noticed as she scrolled through these photos a decade earlier. At the time, Hubbard wrote, "Without beard/facial hair, this could be the man that ran from the house." We stood there and talked to Janelle for a little while. She didn't know Hubbard and hadn't heard that someone else had told the police they'd also seen a scruffy-looking white man run from the scene. She didn't know Fred Gustafson either, who said the police offered him money to pick out Johnson from the lineup. She hadn't thought about that day in 1998 and had no idea that Jesse Johnson had been convicted of killing Harriet Thompson until I called her. After she called her tip into the Salem police station, she thought she'd done her part. The case left her mind. She didn't follow the news of the trial 6 years later. But knowing all this now, she said what happened to Johnson really bothered her.
And if you talk to the guy, let him know, I believe him. I know it was not him. It's so sad that somebody just lost 25 years of their life for something that they didn't do and for something that the police didn't investigate very well.
When we sat down with Detective Mike Quakenbush at the diner in Salem, we had a lot we wanted to ask him about. We wanted to talk about the off-the-bitch statement that Shorty made and how he recanted that later, said Stolk and Quakenbush coerced him to say it. We wanted to talk about Patricia Hubbard and Janelle Osborne saying they saw a white guy running from the scene right around the time of the murder. We wanted to talk about the fingerprint on the vase, which we couldn't be sure was even real. We wanted to understand why it appears that the detectives didn't record any of the times they interrogated Johnson. But perhaps more than anything, we wanted Quakenbush to explain to us why all these different people with no connection whatsoever were telling us the same story, that the police ignored them, that Quakenbush and Stolk failed to consider white suspects so they could charge a black man. And next time, that's exactly what we do.
One of the detectives on this case pointed to Jesse Johnson's photo in a photo lineup and said $1,000 if you pick him.
I don't know about that.
Neither do I.
So, if somebody did, that would be totally inappropriate. That's the whole reason you have a photo lineup.
Hush is reported, written, and produced by me, Leah Satilli, and Ryan Hass. Music by Joe Preston, with contributions from Ryan Hass. Anna Griffin is our editor. Stephen Cray mixed this episode, and Nalene Silva was our audio engineer. Our show art is by Dana Ryerson. Additional art and marketing guidance from Van Cooley, Jennifer McCormick, and Christina Wentzgraff. Tony Schick fact-checked this episode. Legal review was by Rebecca Morris. We had public records assistance from John Bile, Bella Sogard, and Nora Broker. Voice work in this episode was by Conrad Wilson. Thanks to Sage Van Wing, Jen Chavez, Conrad Wilson, and Emily Curitin-Cook for helping shape this series. Michelle Oko, a law professor at Lewis and Clark Law School, provided consultation on this show. Thanks to all the members who make podcasts at OPB possible. If you'd like to go deeper on this episode, check out the documents we've put online at opb.org/hush. You can also email us with tips for future reporting at hush@opb.org. And if you're enjoying this podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Or just tell a friend. It helps the show grow and is a great way to support our work.